Very good. Thank you so much, Bruno. I appreciate the invitation to come present this afternoon. I wish that I could be in a room with all of you where I could see your faces and we could just be together. I obviously prefer that format, and I think most of you would as well, so we could sit together and I could feel your energy and we could just talk about your concerns. And so I'll do my best today to make this presentation as applicable as I can to your situations. Some of you may be here interested in this topic for a family member to begin healing. So much in recovery we talk about how to help the addict and how to get him to stop looking at pornography or her to stop looking at pornography, and helping them be able to achieve what we would call sobriety or abstinence. And less often we talk about the impact on the injured partner, and then even less often than that, we rarely talk about what happens to the relationship, most often the marriage. And so today I'm going to shift my focus from traditionally talking about how to help an addict in recovery per se, and focusing more on the relational impact on partners and on marriages. Now,
Geoff,
yes.
May I interrupt?
Sure.
Sorry, could you bring the microphone closer or speak louder, please? There's comments that says it's very hard to hear. If you could make it louder or bring the microphone. Thank you.
You bet. You bet. I hope that's better. So, and Benoit, let me know if it's still too quiet. I'll do my best to speak up and keep this loud. So one thing that happens a lot in recovery is once a pornography problem is discovered, all the emphasis gets put on getting the individual who's looking at pornography to stop looking at pornography. And while we certainly need that to happen, and we need the person who's looking at it to be accountable and have good boundaries, the next thing that has to happen is what we would call, emotional first aid for the injured partner and for the relationship. And so we're going to spend some time on that today. I'm going to go to my first slide here, and I want you to think about recovery from a pornography problem as a three-part issue. Clearly, the individual needs to get help who's struggling with it, and most often it's men. I work with a lot of women who struggle with pornography, fantasy, other things like that. But if it's okay with all of you, for simplicity today, I'm just going to speak as the addict being a male, even though I recognize it's not always the case. And so we're going to talk about his recovery as the addict, her recovery, and what she needs to do to heal, and then, of course, the couple recovery. And I find that long-term recovery depends on these three things being represented. If we focus just on him, then she continues to live with suspicion, paranoia, grief, loss, all kinds of wounding. If she does her work and he does his work separately, and they're each getting stronger individually, oftentimes there's not a bridge back to the relationship, and so they wonder, is there a way back for us as a couple? Is there a way for us to reconnect? Or are we just going to be two healthy individuals living parallel lives and, being nice to each other, but really the trust, the intimacy, the connection hasn't come back? And so we're going to look at all three of these. I'm going to start this presentation by giving you a little bit of background on attachment. And we believe, those of us who work from an attachment framework, we believe that addiction is an attachment disorder. And I'll explain this in more detail as we go along, but I just want you to understand that what we're going to be talking about now ties directly into addiction. So the word attachment means a lot of things to a lot of different people. For some people it means clingy, regressive, immature. For others it's a very warm thing where it means safety or comfort or connection, security. And it's an inborn need. It's a need that we don't necessarily choose. It's hardwired to us from birth, and we don't ever outgrow it. So, as all of you know, when we have a baby, the baby is not born to self-regulate, meaning that when the baby has pain or distress, discomfort of any kind, which babies do often, whether it's hunger or physical discomfort, they will naturally cry, reach their arms out, turn toward and look for their caregiver, their attachment figure, their primary attachment figure, expecting, again, instinctively, it's expecting that this caregiver will help them regulate their emotions in their body. And so they reach out, the caregiver picks up the baby, and the baby's body, not just their emotions, but their whole body begins to calm down. And that caregiver becomes what we would call a co-regulator. Co meaning together or with. So a regulator that works with the baby to calm the baby down. Now, as babies get older and turn into toddlers and then to, preschoolers and then adolescents and as they grow into adulthood, they don't need as much co-regulation as they do when they're infants, but they still need it. And there isn't some magical age where we outgrow the need for co-regulation. There's this myth out there that the healthiest people don't need other people, and it's a lie. It's not true. We all need other people, and it's something that helps us function better and feel better. And matter of fact, the research on attachment and secure attachment says that it increases confidence, it decreases conflict, it reduces depression and anxiety, it makes us less aggressive, it decreases our susceptibility to shock, to stress, to pain, it makes us more flexible, more curious, it helps us have better self-awareness, it helps us become aware of others, it helps us problem solve, and it improves our physical health, among other benefits. And so, here's the mechanism. We do just fine, and babies do just fine, moving along in life, self-regulating and going along as if everything's going okay, but it's mostly when we are in some form of pain, whether it's an emotional pain like loneliness, sadness, whether it's physical pain to our body, or relational pain. That's when we have this reflex to reach. And the reach, as a baby, is very physical. Come pick me up, come hold me. As we get into adulthood, the reach still happens, but the reach is much more oftentimes relational, seeking comfort from somebody, and often involves touch as well. And you can think of attachment, really there's only about 3 attachments that are what we would call primary, that we depend on. If you come from a Christian-based background, which I do, and I'll just say that I believe very strongly from my faith tradition that we have a strong attachment to God or a higher power, and in our recovery work, we encourage people to seek out their idea, their concept of God or a higher power to help them and soothe them. And much religious hymns and text talks about this relationship as a attachment bond, reaching out, connecting, soothing, comforting. And then when we're born, we have our primary attachment to our parents, our caregivers, and it's a survival imperative. We need them to survive. And then when we're older, as we get into adulthood and even as we age, we still have a romantic attachment, primary attachment to another adult. And like it says in the Bible, when we leave mother and father and cleave to another person, that's that primary attachment. So we leave the primary bond with mom and dad, we bond to another adult, and we depend on that person to be there for us, to care how we feel, to notice us, to see us, and that's what co-regulates us. And so we never outgrow the need for co-regulation. Now, again, we don't need to be picked up and held all the time like a baby, but we certainly need to be noticed, touched, hugged, loved, and paid attention to. And so this is primary attachment. And to understand addiction clearly and the impact on couples and relationships, we have to understand this foundation of primary attachment. Otherwise, addiction and recovery, from our perspective, can seem very confusing and very disorienting. Another way to look at attachment is as a neural duet. And, just like in any sort of a, like a dance, partners are influencing each other, and there's this back and forth energy that's happening all the time. So he makes a move, then she makes a move, and they're responding off each other. And if you see a dancing partner or a dancing pair that are just really tight and really seamless, you'll never really know who's influencing who. It's just sort of happening. Even though there's a lead, she's also influencing the dance, and they're back and forth like that. And a good, solid, secure attachment is almost like a really good dance partnership where they are working together like that. And when that neural duet is broken, when there's a broken attachment or injured attachment, they are stepping all over each other's feet. It's very awkward. Nobody's sure who goes first, how it's supposed to work, and it obviously creates all kinds of problems. And so that foundation of attachment is going to be essential. Think of the impact we have on each other as a hidden regulator. It's oftentimes so below the surface we don't even realize it. Now, addiction is a regulator. So if I'm turning to, let's say, a more familiar type of addiction like drugs or alcohol or food, I'm going to, let's just use food for an example. That's a really common one that I think all of us can relate to when we've comfort eaten. So when there's, let's say, some sort of a breakup or some sort of big emotional thing, oftentimes we will surround ourselves with food, go eat something sweet or something fattening to try and comfort and regulate our body to feel better. And we're not only regulating our emotions, we're regulating our bodies. And the people we love are a lot like that for us. So when we are feeling distressed and in pain, we can hug somebody, connect with somebody, and all of a sudden we feel so much better than we did before. And it's almost like emotional oxygen. Just like when you're scuba diving, you often carry a second regulator with you. If your partner runs out of air, you can pass them your regulator, and it actually helps co-regulate that person so they can survive. Couples do this for each other all the time and don't realize it. And even though relationships can get very messy, especially when we're dealing with addiction recovery, we still actually do better when we're in a mess than we do alone. And so a lot of times partners will ask me, why am I staying in this relationship? Why do I keep doing this? And the reality is that even though it's awful and painful and traumatic, there's still some benefit from fighting and being connected and trying to work things out, fighting for your relationship, than just being alone. Being alone is one of the most punishing things we can experience as a human being. Its isolation is so terrifying, and it's awful. So one thing I want to help you understand now about how addiction plays into this is that addiction is a co-regulator. Addiction is a hidden regulator. And so when a man turns to pornography, he's turning toward it not because he's only just curious or because, he likes sexual things or because he just he just wants that. Now, clearly there are cases where those things happen initially, but as people go on and get stuck in this addiction, we're dealing with much more than just ongoing curiosity or ongoing desire. What we're dealing with on an ongoing basis is pain management. This addiction is not about sex, it's about pain management. It's about basically somebody who doesn't know how else to find comfort in real people, real relationships, reaching for real connection, but instead goes for a counterfeit attachment in the form of pornography. And pornography is particularly powerful because it mimics all the very same feelings we have when we're being connected to a real human being. I one time worked with an individual who was an older gentleman, and he said that years ago when he was 12, he had discovered a pornographic magazine, and he had grown up with a mother who was very abusive, mentally ill, and never touched him or held him or said loving things to him. She was just very, very abusive. And he said that what he was so drawn into and so attracted to with the pornography wasn't the nudity or the bodies. What he noticed and what was so powerful for him was the way he was being looked at by these models. He said he noticed their eyes, and he described them as loving eyes. He said, I'd never seen loving eyes like that before. And I think that really captures what happens with pornography and why it's so powerful. It makes the viewer feel as if they are connected and they belong and that they're needed. And it's totally twisted and seems somewhat irrational that, if we're sitting here from this rational place, we would think, well, clearly they're not being connected. Clearly this is a counterfeit. Clearly it's not going to do anything for them. But our body is really easily fooled, and our emotions are easily fooled. When we're having the experience in our body in that moment, we don't care that it's counterfeit. We'll take whatever. And so this is where pornography becomes very addictive. So even if I look at pornography out of curiosity, what's going to draw me back over and over and over again is going to be figuring out a way to soothe the pain, the secrecy, the shame, the disconnection. And the more that somebody looks at pornography and continues to act out, the more isolated they become from their partner and from real people, the more it increases that attachment distress, and the more they need to co-regulate with something to help them feel okay. And so pornography creates isolation, and it also offers a counterfeit to isolation, which then creates more isolation, and you can see where this cycle goes on and on and on. And so what we want to do in recovery is teach addicts how to co-regulate with people, not just with screens and fantasy and their own bodies. Now let's talk about the partners and what happens to these good women who, in many cases, are women, who are betrayed by a loved one's pornography use. So I'm going to use a quick analogy that will help frame this a little bit. If we were to compare emotional regulation to physical oxygen, then what we would basically say is that, when babies are born, they have the emotional regulatory capacity of about a polar bear. Polar bears can stay underwater for about 2 minutes, and then they have to come up for air. And little babies, they can regulate their emotions very briefly, then they need someone to help them regulate on a regular basis, because they can only last a couple minutes. As we get older into adolescence, we develop more capacity to regulate our emotions, and we don't need people as much. And so it's almost like a seal who can go about 30 minutes underwater without taking a breath, a little bit longer. And then as we get into adulthood, we can go, I think whales can go up to an hour or so, some whales even longer, without taking a breath. And so as adults in a adult marriage relationship, we don't need constant reassurance that our partner is there for us, that they care for us, that we're wanted and needed by them, and that we're safe. However, the second that you introduce a counterfeit attachment, which really becomes a competing attachment, which becomes, in essence, a threat to the secure bond of the marriage, then the partner picks up on this very quickly, and she's not only reacting to perhaps her disgust of pornography, she's also reacting to the fact that her husband is turning away from her to seek comfort, both sexually, but also emotionally, intellectually, in other ways, to someone or something else. Artificial, fake, or real, or whatever. But the threat, the injury to the bond is, I'm alone, I'm isolated, I don't know where this person is, I can't get to them, they aren't there, are they real, they have a double life, they're keeping secrets from me. And then basically what happens is she goes from having the oxygen capacity, the relational security and safety of a whale, which can, last much longer, back down to a polar bear. So this is why a lot of the times partners become very anxious, paranoid, checking things, needing constant reassurance. It's not because they're babies, but because they need constant reassurance because they don't know what's real and they need help co-regulating. And this is where it's really important for husbands and those who love and support these women to learn how to provide rescue breaths. And so in early recovery, what needs to happen is women need rescue breathing, and they need it in the form of opening up to people who can help them. That can be a therapist, that can be a church leader, that can be a sister, a girlfriend, a parent, someone who can support them and their relationship and slow them down, who's not going to fan the flame. So and then the husband, he can provide rescue breaths as well. He's actually one of the most powerful sources of rescue breathing early in the process, if he wants to be. Most guys understand that they are a source of pain for their wives when they betray them. That's why they don't want to open up about it, because they're scared to death of how much pain they're going to cause. But they also can realize that they are a source of comfort as well. And that's actually why she's in so much pain. She's in so much pain because the comfort she thought she was getting from him, or that was exclusively hers, has now gone and is shared and is with someone else. And so he can recapture his role as a source of comfort and give her the emotional support she needs, the space, offer to go to counseling with her, spend time with her if she wants time, give her space if she wants space, listen to her, allow her to talk about her pain. There is so much he can do to provide this rescue breathing. And that's a form of co-regulation, to start to rebuild the attachment back. Most guys, they see how much pain their wife is in, and they think, I got to get away from that. I got to get as far away from her as possible. But that's isolation. That's more abandonment. Now, she might need a night away, or she might need some time or some space to sort out where she's at or what she's thinking, but she doesn't need him just to totally disappear from her. I've seen some cases where that happens, but it's very, very rare. And even if she needs space, most guys will be smart to err on the side of being accessible and responsive, not to overwhelm her with, are you going to leave me, or do you need me, or what's going on, or to just to give her total silence and just say, well, obviously I'm a loser and she doesn't want to be with me, but just to stay present. That's a form of rescue breathing, and it will help stabilize her. And that's something you can do as a husband who's been unfaithful and betrayed the relationship. One of the reasons when we are in that relational trauma, when we're not sure what's real, we discover the double life, we're in this trauma. When we're insecurely attached, when we don't know everything, it's almost like we're walking through a narrow alley. Our perspective is so narrow. And so we only can trust and see and believe what's right in front of us. And this is why men in recovery absolutely have to stay in front of their wives and do things that are visible, like attend counseling, go to their meetings, make lifestyle changes, set good boundaries, those kinds of things early on. If they aren't doing those things, then she's not going to see or notice what's going different. It has to be measurable and obvious. Because over time, as she becomes more secure and she starts to feel more balanced and safe and can start to believe that what he says is what he's going to do, and everything is matching and there's more transparency and openness, those kinds of things ultimately produce a wider view, a more secure view, and it starts to feel more safe, and she can look around and realize, okay, this relationship is safe, I can take in more information, I can believe more things, and that's huge. Men that are serious about changing are going to be open and honest. They're going to try and find out what led them to their addiction. They're going to take full responsibility for making personal changes. They're going to have rules for staying out of behaviors that are negative. They're going to work on their issues in group and therapy. They're going to meet regularly with an ecclesiastical leader. They're going to go on their own and not be forced or threatened to go. They're going to give her as much space or closeness as she needs. They're going to work hard to earn back trust and forgiveness. They're going to be respectful, dependable, take the lead in different areas of church, of family, and make those lifestyle changes. Those are the things that are going to help provide rescue breathing for her early on and help her be able to take in. A lot of guys will tell me, I don't get why she's so paranoid. I don't get why she doesn't trust me or believe me, why she only focuses on the negative. Well, you can do a lot as a husband to help increase her ability to see more than what she's able to see. Now, she has to do her work too. Women who are betrayed by pornography have got to recognize that this is a serious problem and to not blame themselves for it. They need to learn how to set good boundaries and expect honesty and accountability from their husbands. They need to reach out and get support from others, people that have been affected by this, professionals and leaders that can help. And they need to practice self-care and take care of their physical and emotional well-being. Allow themselves to feel emotions, to feel hurt, to feel anger, surrender them to God, talk to others about it, find safe people to visit with, to read and get educated about pornography addiction, and to not accept bad behavior anymore, and have consequences and boundaries and rules for how they're going to react to these things, so they can have some stability and structure and organization with this, and not just have it be a free-for-all. And they also need to be able to ask for closeness, ask for space, and be able to take care of those needs as needed. And so those are the things that a woman who's been betrayed, who's in recovery, the things she's going to want to be working on. So as he works on his recovery, as she works on her recovery, then we're going to also now talk about what the couple can do in their recovery, because they have to treat the marriage as a separate thing. So, like we talked about before, when there is sexual acting out of any kind, it derails the attachment, and it creates a relationship trauma response where the relationship is now in trauma, it's injured. And whatever connection they had before, no matter how good the relationship was before, it is now injured and damaged by the betrayal. And so we have to look at this about repairing the bond, not just improving communication skills or getting along better, but really thinking of this as, I have to repair this bond that was broken and figure out how to get this thing back on track so that we're secure, we're doing our neural duet dance again. The thing that happens for women who are betrayed by pornography and sexual acting out is they feel distant, disconnected, far from their partner. They don't know who he is. They're wondering where they've been all this time, what he's thinking, who he is, what he wants, whether they have shared values or not. And for him, he just is feeling shame. He just feels unacceptable, like he's a piece of junk, like he's not wanted. And so his natural tendency when he feels unacceptable is to pull away and to hide, or to overwhelm her to prove that he is a good person. And her natural tendency generally, when she feels disconnected, is to pursue connection by trying to ask questions, get to the bottom of this, understand it better, seek out information, and that's where a lot of the checking stuff comes. Or she may just give up and surrender to this disconnection and just pull away. One of the best maps for helping couples is the work that Sue Johnson has done with emotionally focused couples therapy. And my co-author and I, Mark Chamberlain, wrote a book called Love You, Hate the Porn, which is the title of this presentation, but it's also a book that we wrote using the principles of adult attachment and emotionally focused couples therapy to help couples get a clear map back to each other. And the amount of time it would take to explain all this doesn't fit into this presentation, but I'll give you a reference to the book at the end so that you can pick it up and understand the map on how couples can get back to each other. But here's a brief description from the book that explains the cycle that couples get into when addiction is discovered and then how they can transition out of it. And I do recognize that there is a typo in there, and I didn't have a chance to fix it before this, so you'll have to forgive me for that. But on the bottom bubble there where it has two lines around it, it says he keeps his struggles to himself. Typically when a man is discovered with pornography or opens up about it, he has a hard time opening up and being vulnerable and sharing what this is like for him. And so he'll keep it to himself, hide, deny, minimize. It's very normal to do that. And what it does is it cuts him off from the support going to the left, doesn't get the support he needs, so his struggles get worse because he's in more pain and isolation and increases his shame. And of course, his wife, she's tied to him in this neural duet. She's his dance partner, and she's going to feel emotional distance when he's hiding. She can feel something's wrong. She's going to know something's not right. Of course, when she feels that isolation, that disconnection, it increases her attachment distress. She may come to him and complain, say something, she might pull away, but she's going to raise the intensity, which of course creates more pain for him. Now, she's not creating his shame. She's influencing it because of their connection, but he's creating his own shame because he's hiding. But one thing that can happen over time is as the couple starts to heal, he's going to start opening up to her about how hard it is for him to talk about it. You know, even if he doesn't get really good yet at opening up and telling her everything, which we hope he'll do someday, but even initially, even if he can say to her, I'm so terrified of opening up to you. I don't even know how to do it. I'm afraid you'll leave me. Now, instinctively, she's going to start to understand this guy's coming to me. He's opening up. He's being real. And she's going to start to slow down. It's going to actually create some connection. Now, this may sound kind of weird because he might still be acting out. He might still have hurtful behaviors. He may not be telling everything yet. But even any movement toward her, we find, will start to soften and reconnect and rebuild this attachment. Then she can tell him how awful it is to have him hide from her. She can talk about how terrible it is to have him disappearing on her. And then he can start to hear in somewhat of a way that perhaps she just wants to be close to him, that she doesn't want him to be distant. Now, oftentimes, this is hard to do without some kind of therapeutic support, but I just want to show you the pathway back. And then what ends up happening is he starts to do this more often and seek emotional support from her and from others. He's strengthened by connection. The struggles get better. His shame goes away. Of course, it builds more closeness for her, increases her secure base. It's easier for her to support him. And then, of course, it creates a virtuous, positive cycle. Now, this all is let out by him. He is the one that initiates this because he's the one with the secret. And so recognize that what really is satisfying this attachment isn't the fact that she's just going to be super nice and super loving and super connected as soon as he opens up, and that need's going to get met right away. That's not really what's working here. It's the connection. It's turning toward her. Think of it as just a movement toward the relationship, opening up. It takes courage for a man to come out of hiding. It takes courage to do that. I have women tell me all the time, you know, I understand that he's going to mess up, or I understand that he's human, or that he's made mistakes, but I can't handle the hiding and the secrecy. When he hides and he moves away from me, that's the worst for me. I can't handle that. And what that tells me over and over again is that what we're looking for is connection. We're not looking for people to be perfect. We're looking for connection. And in that connection, it increases the likelihood that you won't need to reach out to a counterfeit connection, which is pornography and sexual acting out. And over time, as you learn to do this more and more, it starts to heal the system. This is why I'm a big fan of people doing face-to-face counseling in groups, 12-step meetings, instead of just reading a book all by themselves or doing something online all by themselves to heal in isolation. Our bodies and our emotions need real people and real connection, and we've got to turn to real people. And if we need to turn to, again, a therapist or a friend or a group as a half step back toward the full step of connecting to our marriages and our most important relationships, then so be it. And a lot of people feel like, oh, I don't know if I could ever do that. You know, that's just so hard, or I don't know if I'll remember all of this. Let me just give you some encouragement here. In love, you don't need to be rich or smart or talented. You just have to be there. So even if you show up as an addict and you say, I don't know how to reach out, and you say that to your partner, that's reaching out. And if you're a woman in pain and you are isolated and alone and afraid and you don't have anybody to talk to, and you just say to somebody, I don't have anybody to talk to, now you're talking to somebody. And as a couple, as you start to reach out toward each other like that, you'll start to rebuild the bridge back to each other. But again, I'm just going to reemphasize, it's built on a foundation of him taking individual accountability and responsibility, working his own individual recovery, her working her own individual recovery, and then together working to understand how this addiction affects both of them, and then using that natural attachment bond of I need you, I want you to be there for me, I want to seek comfort and co-regulate, and reaching out to each other in safe ways initially, and ultimately learning how to do this more fluidly, that will rebuild the attachment bond. And this takes time. It takes, in many cases, a few years to really get that neural duet back down to where it feels secure. You may not need to be in counseling for every week for 3 years, but you certainly need to give it time for this thing to rebuild. And every time there's a relapse or a new secret, it derails the attachment, breaks the bond, and it has to be repaired, and you have to do it the exact same way you did before. And over time, as that becomes less frequent or it eliminates entirely, then the bond will hold, and that's how couples heal. Let me point you to a couple of resources, and then I'll take some questions. Our book is called Love You Hate the Porn. You can buy it at DeseretBook.com. You can go to Amazon.com and buy it from any bookseller. And then we also have a 6-part audio series, 6 hours long, that I recorded with a colleague of mine called Strengthening Recovery Through Strengthening Marriage, Healing from Pornography Addiction. And you can purchase that audio series at marriage-recovery.com. So, Binoy, I'm going to end this presentation now and open up for questions.
You're terrific, Geoff. That was fantastic. I was listening real hard, and boy, have you covered a lot of ground. And some of these questions that have come in, even in the registration phase, as well as the questions that are pouring in right now, I know we're not going to. Redress some of the stuff you've said, but I think it'll be important. And for everybody who's on the webinar, we're not going to be able to cover everything. We apologize. But I've already seen a theme, and if I may, summarize in some cases many of the questions into a couple of pockets. So, Geoff, one topic that comes up, and again, it's an important one, especially for the wives. The question is, how do I get past the hurt? How do I, as the partner, move on, not feel anger, guilt? So continuing theme here is, how do I get past it? How do I get hope that something good will come out? Could you address that? It's a bit nebulous, but it is a theme that is consistently coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll answer this in 2 ways. I'll answer it for a woman who has a husband who is actively working in recovery. she's going to have the added benefit of having him learn how to, again, be that co-regulator and help her. And ultimately, her deepest wounds are going to be healed as she turns back toward the relationship and opens back up to learning to trust again. This wound, and then for a woman who doesn't have a partner, whether he's left the marriage or he's not working his recovery, she's going to have to turn to other people and use those supports as a way to help her. Because either way, that same attachment system requires real people. Now, this trauma that you're describing in this question, the pain and the hurt, is coming from relationship trauma, a lot like post-traumatic stress disorder. And so you absolutely have to look at this as a death or a grief and loss process. And so, most people that are dealing with death and grief, it takes years to fully heal that. And when we are helping women through this process, we help them name and understand their losses and be able to open up and talk about them. And so I believe every woman that's been affected by this owes it to herself and to her marriage, if she's married, to find an individual counselor and a couples counselor who's trained in sexual addictions, working with pornography addictions, who can help her through this process. And there's some great reading resources as well. My friend, Real Croshaw, just barely released a book called, I believe it's called What Can I Do About Me? And you can find this book, and it's written specifically for women, for partners who are trying to heal the pain. And I think it's a great resource. You can find her book on her website at realrecovery.com, and it's her name, Real, RHYLL recovery.com, RHYLL recovery.com. I would encourage you to pick up a copy of her book, and that will give you a great roadmap for understanding the steps you need to take to heal all that pain. And if you can find somebody to walk you through it, that's even better. But this is grief and loss and trauma, and you absolutely have to do your own work and not just wait till he gets better.
Thank you. I'm going to follow that theme with another series of questions that I am now compiling. And by the way, for everyone who's still on the webinar, a reminder, this is being recorded. It will be posted on the website, and you will receive an email with a link so you can, again, review and revisit this great webinar. The second theme that we are seeing, and I am seeing here with the questions, Geoff, is, so, how do I deal with it and so forth? But then comes the question, how do I communicate without making our situation worse? How can I communicate my pain? How can I talk about it and not have him shut down? What advice would you give on that one, Geoff? The communication part, in this case, of a female partner to the male.
Well, that's a great question. And one way to understand this, and this is something that Mark Chamberlain put in our book, is that you can think of your pain on three levels. There's the there's the heat on the top level, which is kind of the flames, and this is the stuff like, I'm upset that you're home late, or I'm upset that you had another slip with pornography. So there's that heat, and it's the intensity, it's the anger, and obviously, when you're coming at it from the heat perspective, it's going to create a lot of disconnection and pain and hurt. But if you can drop down a little bit lower into the hurt, so for example, let's just use the example of coming home late, and just a really simple one, where the heat might be something like, you're always late. The hurt might be something like, I worry so much when you're late. Now you're getting into the pain. Now you're getting into the softer pain and hurt of what's going on. And now you're talking about you, and you're talking about how it affects you, and that's a little bit more soft. And if you can drop even one level lower into the hope. The hope is the softest, most vulnerable part of you. And this is the hardest place to talk from. And to be honest with you, if your partner's not working his recovery, he's not a safe person emotionally, he can't really hear and hold and understand your pain, then it's going to be really hard to talk about it from this softer place. You might want to talk more in the hurt area, but the hope is the softest, and the hope might be something like, I just really need to know that you're there for me. And when you're late, I just get so afraid that you don't care about me, and that I'm not important to you, and that I'm not on your mind. Now, when you're talking at it from the hope part, boy, it's so soft now, and you hope that at this point you're in caring hands, somebody who can protect you and hold you. But those are some different layers you can use to understand where you're talking to your partner from. I find that most men who are in early recovery, and early meaning the first 6 months, really struggle to hear and understand and connect to their partner's pain because it increases their own pain. And so you have to recognize that as they get help and they get healthier, they'll increase their capacity to hear your pain. But I tell women, you absolutely have to keep bringing him your pain. Talk with other people about it that are safe supports so that you can practice talking about it and be clear about it. Maybe drop it into some softer levels so that you can bring it to him from that softer place. And it's much more tender, much more inviting.
That is fantastic. That is. I have a series of questions that have come up, and it goes in the area of working together. And I'm going to take one specific question, and it's a question that is going to jump to one extreme. And so let me ask you this question. The question that came in, I'm going to read it verbatim. If porn has been a problem for someone in a relationship, is it ever appropriate to then use it together in a relationship?
Well, my opinion on that is no. I come from the belief that pornography is harmful to relationships in any form, and because basically what you're doing is you're trading intimacy for intensity, and those are very different things. And couples think that a way to improve their sex life is to increase the intensity. But really what's going to increase their sex life or improve it is more intimacy, more connection. I mean, what we're wired for is not intensity. We're wired for connection and to know that someone's there for us, wants us. And if we're both paying attention to other people doing sexual things or getting aroused by other people's bodies or actions, then all we're doing is increasing intensity. We're not really bonding to each other more. Yeah, the couple might be having more exciting or dynamic sexual experience, but really what they're doing is doing that through other people. And to me, the most bonding, the most healthy connecting sexual intimacy is when the couple are facing each other alone, together, building a bond, eye contact. Like that is how we're wired, to mirror each other. And so to me, pornography doesn't really fit into a relationship because of that. It becomes a distraction, and it really ultimately starts to create more feelings of insecurity for the couple to really develop the kind of connection, the kind of bond. And that's a very highly controversial response I'm giving, because many magazines and popular media things would say that that's a way to spice up your sex life. And I think if you're looking just for intensity, then yeah, that's exactly what it'll do. But if you're looking for deeper bonded intimacy and more secure connection, then I don't think it fits in very well at all.
Thank you very much. Very clear, your response. Another area that has now come up is in terms of the actual word and the use of the term boundaries. especially when it comes to the wife or the female partner. The question came about, since pornography has been part of our relationship and he will not get help, when it comes to boundaries, who am I setting boundaries for? What type of boundaries am I to set? Is a question that comes from a lady. Can you help with that one, Geoff?
Yeah, absolutely. Think of boundaries as not a way to control what your partner does, because you can't control that. Think of boundaries as you deciding where you stop. You decide where you stop. So, for example, I worked with a woman one time who said to her husband, you continue to look at pornography in our home with our children, you'll need to leave the home. And he said, it's my house, I'm not leaving the home. So now she's like, well, how do I set this boundary? Because I can't control him. And then she realized that she has to decide where she stops. And so she packed up the kids, and as disruptive as this was, and she moved out of the home to live with her parents and left him alone there so that he couldn't influence the children with his pornography use. And that's an example of a boundary. And that's an extreme one. That's not where I think everybody should start. But so you can think of a boundary as, this is where my line is, where I'm going to stop. So a lot of the times the boundaries involve, for most people, pulling away, decrease in intimacy. A lot of the times a lot of women will find that they just don't feel sexually attracted anymore. They feel unsafe emotionally. They don't want to be close or touch or be near their partner because they're disgusted by what's happening. And those are very natural boundaries that are already happening internally that just need to be communicated on the outside and honored. And so you don't need to worry about controlling anybody else. You just need to worry about being clear about where you need to stop and where you need to set things in place, and then just honor that. And it takes courage, and it's very difficult to do. And sometimes you can state your boundary and say, I need this, and this is where I need to stop. And then your partner, if he's in a good place, in good recovery, he's humble, then in many cases he'll honor that, and then that can be part of the healing process. Real Croshaw's book that I mentioned earlier has a whole chapter on boundaries, and I recommend that highly.
Thank you, Geoff. I just had to unmute myself so that I didn't make noises. We're running out of time, but there's so many good points here. I would like to now bring up something more along the male side, and I'm going to kind of sort of squish it all together. And the questions that have come up, Geoff, are along the lines of, how do I stop with my porn? And I'm going to read a specific wording on this specific one. Let me get it. What if I don't need counseling? So how do I stop, and what if I don't need counseling? What would you say to that sort of two-pronged question?
Well, I think if somebody's going to stop, they need to come out of hiding, first of all, admit to themselves and someone else that they are struggling with this. Most guys try and do this on their own, and then they wonder why they can't stop. So full accountability in person with somebody else is essential. Getting educated about it. And again, I think that most guys would love to be able to do this without having to get counseling, because they don't want to pay for it, or they don't want to have to be embarrassed. But if you have tried to stop multiple times and you can't stop, then you probably need some counseling. And counseling is a place where you can have accountability, but you can also start to have, again, this practice for reaching out and learning how to connect to real people. And that's one of the biggest benefits of counseling. And even if in your area you don't have a counselor who's an expert in sex addictions, even just starting to have that open up and tell your story, and as you're reading books and getting resources and learning about this, even that relationship can help you deal with some of the underlying issues that have created and maintained your addiction, like oftentimes fear of intimacy, sometimes trauma, anxiety, other ways of mishandling moods, relationship issues. And so one of the best ways to quit is to surrender yourself to the fellowship and company of other men who struggle, whether it's a 12-step group or a counseling group, and just getting help that way, asking for help, reaching out for help. Just on your own, just hunkering down and trying to stop by yourself is going to just continue to perpetuate the problem.
Thank you. It is now at the top of the hour, and we have so many questions, but we have run out of time. And we really appreciate what you've done. And like some people are already saying, great webinar, thank you. My sincere thanks to you, Geoff. Thanks to all of you. Many of you still, in the hundreds, are still on this webinar. We appreciate your participation and for coming in. But mostly, Geoff, thank you so much. We are recording this, and we will post this online and give you a copy and send it. Any last comments, Geoff, before we hang up and end this webinar?
No, I just appreciate all of those who've jumped in to listen. I hope you're able to get the answers that you need. And Benoit, I'd be happy to come back anytime to present on other topics or to expand anything that we've talked about today to offer help to those who need answers. But thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much, everybody. We hope this has been valuable. Thank you for participating. We're now officially closing the webinar. Look forward to seeing you again on future webinars that we put together. And Geoff, thank you again. Everybody have a great day and a great relationship. Thank you all.